Welcome, Gunrunner.
Since I started making these greatest of all time videos, one of my most eagerly awaited votes has been for the Sega Saturn. I was constantly getting asked to do it, and indeed, as the Saturn is by far one of my favourite consoles ever, it was one I was really looking forward to making. The Saturn is one of those machines that sadly failed to achieve the success it deserved in its commercial life, but is now getting the respect it deserves in its afterlife. This is backed up by the voting in my own greatest consoles of all time video, where you put it in 13th place, above such heavyweights as the original Xbox, Nintendo Game Boy and Sony PlayStation 3. As with previous greatest of all time videos, I put the big question to the members of several large retro gaming groups on Facebook, including the hugely popular and very lively Retro Gaming Hysteria, link in the description for those who want to join, as well as my own loyal subscribers, asking them to name their top 5 and the reasons why. Following the same rules as before, I awarded 5 points to your first choice, 4 points to second, and so on and so forth. I then counted up these votes to decide the final placings. In the case of games having the same number of points, I then went to the number of votes awarded, followed by the number of first place votes to decide the final rankings. I use these tiebreakers a lot in the middle part of the top 20 and also towards the end of the top 40, but mostly speaking the results were pretty clear. Given my high regard for the Saturn, I was eagerly anticipating the results of this poll and couldn't wait to dig down to it. In all honesty though, there were no real surprises here at all. There is the odd game I thought would finish higher, and I got the number 1 wrong, which I usually manage to predict, but that result was a pretty close one, so again, not a huge surprise. I actually think this top 20 gives a remarkably good picture of the Saturn library, with a mix of both Western and Japanese games, with all the big hitters making the final countdown. With all that said, I really don't want to give much more away, as I'm sure you're already guessing what's going to appear, and that makes it a good time to hit the music and get on with the show. One of my own personal picks, I'd happily argue that Fire Pro S is one of the greatest wrestling games ever. For starters, you have an amazing roster that features the very best of the then WWF, WCW, ECW and New Japan, but it also has every game mode under the sun too.
One, two.
One of the Saturn's very best exclusives, and also a very original game to boot, Burning Rangers was one of the very last games to be released for the console in the West. Created by Sonic Team, this is also a graphical tour de force that really pushes the hardware to its limits.
You'll be able to go from there.
Yikes!
Both Virtua Cop games received a lot of votes, but it was the conversion of the second game that broke the top 20. This is undoubtedly my favourite gun game for the Saturn, and the expanded multiple routes of this sequel greatly add to the whole gameplay experience. I was so pleased to see so many of my personal favourites make this list, and Baku Baku is another, which I regard as one of the best puzzle games ever, and I will never understand why Sega didn't make numerous sequels. This would make a perfect modern day mobile phone game. Although Sega's own conversion of their hugely popular Daytona USA arcade game received quite a bit of criticism upon release, leading to the far superior revised Championship Circuit edition, you liked it enough to see it make the top 20. It's all about that amazing music for me.
You can take it. You can take it.
Every console needs a version of Bomberman. It's one of the greatest multiplayer games ever made, and there's a reason Konami is still pumping out new versions to this very day. But back in 1996, the Sega Saturn got the very best version of all, supporting an incredible 10 players at once.
Saturn Bomberman.
An awful lot of people seem to forget that Tomb Raider debuted on the Saturn as a timed exclusive, with so many wrongly remembering it debuting on the rival PlayStation. This was a big deal at the time, and it's a real shame that Sega weren't able to capitalise on the move more. Known as Dynamite Decker in Japan, this was rethemed as a die-hard game for the West to add a bit more star appeal, but it wasn't really needed because Die Hard Arcade is an absolutely outstanding scrolling beat-em-up that very much paved the way for the genre moving into 3D. Right here we have the game that persuaded me to go out and buy a Saturn. Not only was it incredibly beautiful, a big draw in itself, it also featured some pretty compelling gameplay too. Sure, the sequel would improve on the template massively, but we're right to remember this original game. And as we approach the top 10, we find the first game that didn't reach the West, which is a great shame considering its prestige, taking possibly the two best fighting games of the era in X-Men Children of the Atom and Super Street Fighter 2 and combining them into one amazing package.
Up the glass.
Here you go. Power drain.
X-Men versus Street Fighter!
And from one Street Fighter game to another, with the third game in the spin-off Alpha series. One of the very last commercial games to be released for the console, it was a fitting send-off that really pushed the outstanding 2D abilities of the Saturn to its very limits.
Street Fighter 03.
One of the most legendary games on the Saturn, partly due to its rare Japanese-only release, but also down to it being an absolutely amazing shoot-'em-up that remained exclusive to the console for a long time, Radiant Silvergun was created by the amazing Treasure, whose games always impressed. During the voting process for this video, one of the running themes in the comments was around just how many amazing RPGs the Saturn has, and that's why you'll see several of them in this top 10, starting with Dragon Force, which was one of the few to be translated for a Western release. My personal runner-up as far as the greatest Saturn games go, Guardian Heroes is the finest scrolling beat-em-up available for the system, and brought a host of new concepts to the genre, including its unlockable characters, battle royale style modes, RPG-like story, and multiple paths. The first two Shining Force games proved very popular on the Saturn's predecessor, the Mega Drive, so Sega fans were ecstatic when the franchise was carried onto the new 32-bit console too. And they were right to be excited, as it remains one of the best RPGs released for the console. After the somewhat lacklustre port of the first game that did nothing to show the power of the Saturn, Sega excelled themselves with the conversion of the sequel. The amazing engine that utilised the console's high-res mode really showed that the Saturn could compete with the rival PS1 when it came to 3D.
Fight! 2, ready, go!
We've already had the first game on this list, and now we have the second, which only just missed out on a medal. Not only did Panzer Dragoon Zwei greatly improve on the visuals of its predecessor, with its greatly enhanced draw distance, but also added multiple paths to make the gameplay less linear. And from the second Panzer Dragoon game to the third, and a game that took the franchise in a totally different direction, throwing away the on-rails shooter mechanics and replacing it with a story-driven RPG that many still regard as one of the best ever, and the high price of this game reflects that. I personally had this one down as the winner, and indeed it only missed out by 5 points, making it one of the closest battles I've seen for a while in these videos. But what's left to say about Sega Rally on the Saturn? An absolutely outstanding coin-op conversion and one of the best arcade racing games ever.
Sega Rally Championship.
We might not have got a proper 3D Sonic game on the Saturn in the end, but we did get the absolutely stunning Knights, a visually beautiful and incredibly original game by Sonic Team that also got an amazing seasonal spin-off that I still make sure I play every single Christmas.
There's never been a game like Sega Saturn's Knights. Never been a game that's allowed you to fly, fluid and free, in real-time 3D. Never, not anywhere. But especially not on that other system. Simply because, with only one processor, it doesn't have the power to do it. Fly, plaything, fly. You're not ready.
And that rounds up my look at the 20 greatest Sega Saturn games of all time. But which games were you most surprised not to see make the final list? Or are there any games that you don't think were worthy of inclusion in this countdown? I also love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube backers for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following people in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Paul Daniel, Mins, Dos Gamerman, Luke MC, Carl Olsen, Seth Robinson, Grady Haynes, Mark Strickland, Kalimatorn, Trogdor the Burninator, Daniel Skoronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, David Maddox, Your Eyes Are Bleeding, Classic Gamer 74 and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now, where you can get access to a whole bunch of content including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.